Okay, all right, I'm still struggling with my setup here. If you can see the microphone, maybe that's what we're doing now. I don't know. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime. It's Crue Trime. My name is Sarah and I am here to tell you a terrible story to ruin your day and put on my makeup at the same time. If you're into that, you are in the right place. So if you subscribe to this channel, then you'll never miss one of my terrible stories. Today's terrible story was recommended by a viewer, and this viewer actually is from the area where this took place in, and it's really sort of a small town, so they didn't want to be mentioned. Totally understand. So you know who you are. Thank you. I appreciate you. This is the story of Angela Lee Freeman. By the way, if you want to know what makeup I'm using in this video, then just look down in the description box because everything is linked. Angela Lee Freeman was born on January 16th, 1976 in Petal, Mississippi, to an unwed teen mom, Deborah Freeman. Turns out Angela's father was actually a married man. And Deborah was only 17 years old at the time that she got pregnant, so not really starting out on a great foot here. Deborah also kept her pregnancy with Angela a secret and didn't tell the father that the baby existed for like 16 years. When Angela was about 3 years old, Deborah actually married a man named Dewey and they had a son, but that relationship wasn't super healthy. You know, Dewey was abusive. So they divorced. And then Deborah stayed single for like the next 12 years. So the three of them, Deborah, Angela, and her little brother, were very tight. And in fact, the entire family was tight because remember, Deborah was still a teenager and living at home when she had Angie. So her Aunt Donna, you know, Deborah's sister Donna, and her mother, Clydell, were very involved in the upbringing. Angie, as a child, was described as jolly, fun-loving, and quite a jokester. The older she got, she turned into what her grandmother described as hell on wheels.
You're wild!
But everyone who spoke about Angela said that if she had ever said anything hurtful to you in anger, she would always go back and apologize right away. As I mentioned, Angie was described by friends as a firecracker, also a peacemaker, which is an interesting combination. She was also boy crazy, you know, always talking about this boy or that boy, and she loved New Kids on the Block. Same, Angie, same. One of Angie's childhood friends said that she recalls spending a lot of time trying on outfits and doing their hair and makeup, and Angie always insisted on being dressed up if they were going to go out. So when Angie got into high school years, she started getting into trouble a lot. She was just growing up fast. She was pretty wild. She was just really ready to live life. You know, she was breaking curfew, sneaking out so that she could party, drinking and smoking and all of that. She wasn't interested in wasting time at school. So when she wasn't sleeping through her classes, she was skipping them altogether. She later dropped out in the spring of 1993 during her sophomore year. She had been working at Burger King, but then later moved on to Crystal on Hardy Street in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Crystal is like the southern equivalent of White Castle, if you're not familiar. Angie, although she wasn't interested in being in school, she did intend on getting her GED and then later going on to become an X-ray tech. So it was also around this time that Angie was dating a boy named Stephen Lindsay. And Stephen, or Steve, came from a pretty respectable family in town, but Stephen's family didn't like him being around Angie. They thought she was trouble. So their relationship was sort of like on the down low, and it just really didn't have any future, you know? But Angela was really hung up on Stephen. So when Angie was originally working down at the BK Lounge, she made friends with a coworker named Ruby Boucher. Her last name is now Kelly, I think. So Ruby was actually the first one to leave Burger King and move on to Crystal, and she actually got Angie the job there. She was a little bit older. I think she was about 19 years old at the time and lived in a trailer with her boyfriend, Larry Posey. And while working at Crystal, Angie and Ruby got to be pretty close friends, and Angie even moved in with her for a brief time. Turns out that actually wild child Angie was actually messing around with Ruby's boyfriend Larry behind Ruby's back. Apparently the relationship between Larry and Ruby was unstable at best, and when they would argue, Larry would turn to Angela for comfort. And this kind of game of musical chairs kicked off, so try to keep up. So Angela moves in with Ruby and Larry, then Angela moves out but is still secretly messing around with Larry behind Ruby's back. Then Ruby and Larry break up, Ruby moves out, Angela moves in, Angela and Larry are then like an official item, but then they break up, and then Angela moves out, then Ruby moves back in, and then Ruby and Larry got engaged. Then Ruby finds out about their little secret trysts, and the friendship with Angela dissolves. Then Angela moved back home with her parents and tried to rekindle her relationship with Steve and Lindsay. And this all happened over the period of like a month or two, a couple months. And then Angela found out that she was pregnant.
That escalated quickly.
So Angie was living at home with her mom and brother and her mom's fiance, Bill Stewart. Now, rumor has it that Bill Stewart was an active member of the White Knights of Mississippi, which is a militant branch of the Ku Klux Klan. But again, just rumor. So a little detail in this story that is totally unimportant by today's standards, but in 1993, rural Mississippi definitely played a role in what happened next. So Larry Posey was a black man, and Angela was white. That kind of match was largely socially unacceptable. Now, Angie's mother, Deborah, didn't have a problem at all with Larry, but she didn't want to put her relationship with Bill Stewart at risk by siding with her wild child and not her husband-to-be. So, 17-year-old Angie is now pregnant with presumably a black man's baby. She wasn't too happy to learn that her teenage daughter was going to be a single mom. You know, she wanted better for her. But Angie seemed to be excited, and she had even already picked out a name, Crystal Lynn. But now, with a baby on the way, Bill was officially insisting that Angela move out. They weren't saying it was directly because she had been dating a black man or is presumably pregnant by a black man, but it did come up later. So Angie was kicked out in the summer of 1993, and Ruby and Angie later reconciled their friendship. Angie apologized for sneaking around with Larry, and also Ruby was pregnant too.
Fudge!
But it was during this friendship reconciliation conversation that Angie revealed that she wasn't entirely sure who the father of the baby was. Was it Larry or was it Stephen? So Angie's trying to get herself together, and she was making plans for after the baby comes. She was reining in her wild partying ways, she was trying to stabilize things with work, and she was actually planning to move in with her friend and co-worker, Paula Kraft. On Wednesday, September 8th, 1993, Angie dropped by her mom's house and gave her $80 for her car payment, and then she sat down in the kitchen on the bar stools to, just spend time with her mom and her brother, Nicholas. They chatted about nothing in particular, but they both said later that Angie was in very good spirits. Angela told her mom that she was planning to spend the next 2 days at Paula's, and then she was scheduled to work the early morning shift at Crystal the following Saturday. Deborah said that when Angie left that day, she said, "Love you, Mom," and that was the last words she ever heard from her daughter. After she left her mom's house, Angie made a payment on a layaway purchase of baby clothes and then went and picked up some groceries. On Thursday, September 9th, 1993, Angie spent the day with Paula, as planned. Paula actually asked Angie to come with her to go visit some friends in Slidell, Louisiana, which was about 90 minutes away from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, but Angie wasn't feeling well. The temperatures in Mississippi were still pretty high in September, and it had been a really hot summer, and Angie was dealing with being pregnant, and early pregnancy is just not a fun time, apparently. Is any part of pregnancy a fun time? Anyways, Angie decided to just stay back and Paula went ahead, but when she got home around 2 a.m., she thought she'd find Angie asleep, but instead she found a note from her. So Angie apparently had gone out and left a note asking Paula to make sure that she didn't latch the slide lock on the door because she'd be back soon. So late that night, or, technically early the next morning, Angie was seen at Pizza Hut in Petal, Mississippi. It was the early morning hours, like 1 a.m. So Angie's on again, off again boyfriend, Stephen Lindsay, was the manager, and she had dropped by to see him. The two of them were seen by witnesses in the parking lot having a very heated argument. And this wasn't like a violent, hitting, screaming kind of argument, just raised voices. Well, Stephen came back inside the restaurant to finish closing out, and Angie got in her car, her 1984 silver Honda Accord, and drove away alone. That was the last time Angela Freeman was ever seen. A few hours later, Randy Freeman, who's Angie's uncle, was running late, headed to his girlfriend's house, and decided to take a shortcut across the Manette Bridge. Am I saying that right? Manette? Sorry. So the Manette Bridge was taken out of service in 1980. It was not a serviceable, maintained bridge. It was located in a rural, wooded area that crossed the Leaf River, and local kids were warned to not cross it at night alone. I mean, it's incredible to me that the thing was still standing and that people could drive across it at this time. I couldn't find any pictures of it in service. Look at this thing! That's a death trap! I think it eventually did fall down. But anyways, I'm getting off track. So as Uncle Randy approached the bridge, he noticed Angela's car was parked at the base of it. Angie was not in the car, nobody was, and he didn't stop, but it definitely struck him as odd. Angie would never go to that creepy-ass bridge alone in the dark. She was afraid of the dark. Anyways, when he was coming back from his girlfriend's house, he kind of came back the same way, and he noticed that Angie's car was still there. This time, he stopped and checked out the car, and he felt it. It was not warm, so she hadn't just been sitting in there. When he was able to get to a phone, he called Angie's mother's house to let her know what he saw, and nobody could find Angela or get in touch with her.
No, don't like that.
Saturday, September 11th, 1993 rolled around, and Angela did not show up for that early morning shift at Crystal. Her manager called her mom, Deborah. So Angie did not have a good record for showing up to high school, but she was a very dedicated, hard worker, and she never missed a shift without making sure that somebody would cover for her, or at the least notifying her manager. So something was really wrong. Well, Deborah immediately called Forest County to report Angie as missing. They sent a deputy out immediately to file this missing persons report, but because the car was actually found in Perry County, the next county over, Forest County didn't have the jurisdiction and couldn't investigate the scene. So Deborah contacted the Perry County Sheriff's Department again and told them that Angie had been reported missing and she was going to go out to the Manette Bridge where the car was, and could they please meet her out there so that they could dig in. In an interview with Deborah, she pointed out that from her location, she had to drive about a half an hour out to the spot, but the sheriffs would have only had to drive 10 minutes. All that time passed, she gets out there, the sheriffs aren't there. She sat there waiting for an hour before she called them are you coming? And they're like, oh, okay, we'll be right there. So already not a very promising start. 2 deputies eventually did arrive a few hours later, and when they started looking at the car, it was parked on the side of the road by the bridge, and the passenger side was in the tall grass, and it looked like somebody had gotten into the passenger seat. It closed the door on the tall grass, into the car. Also next to it was a puddle of fluid that was red in color, and Deborah pointed it out, and the sheriff immediately dismissed it as transmission fluid from some logging truck. Deborah had a brother named Roger who had just completed police academy training, and he was working at the Hattiesburg Regional Airport, so she called him to come out to the scene. He saw the car differently. He saw what looked like blood drops on the back window. So he collected a sample of this fluid and sent it to the police lab for testing, and they would find out much later that it was Angie's blood. So this sheriff or police or whatever started asking Deborah a lot of questions. Did Angie like to drink? Did she stay out late? Did she like to party? Well, Deborah tried to explain to them that Angie was pregnant, so she was not drinking or doing any drugs. She was, in fact, trying to protect her baby and had plans for this child. Well, the sheriff or whatever told Deborah that 2 other girls had already ran away this week, so she should just be patient and wait for her daughter to come back when she's good and ready. What? This sheriff told Deborah, quote, "She got drunk and ran off with somebody. Y'all go on and take the car." What? Huh? What do you mean take the car? Aren't you gonna collect evidence and investigate and inspect this car? No. The sheriff told Deborah, "Well, if she don't call you in a few days, you let us know. And I don't see no struggle, so nothing happened here." The car was a stick shift, so Deborah had asked, "Well, how am I supposed to drive this thing home without disturbing evidence?" He handed her a handkerchief to cover the shift knob.
Okay.
They sent this entire crime scene back to Deborah's house to be parked in the backyard for 2 more years. This car, by the way, was like Angela's prized possession. It was like the one thing she had in the world. There was no way that she would have ditched that car on her own free will. Also, Angela never picked up her last paycheck, and none of her clothes or belongings were missing aside from like her purse and the keys to the car. Well, Deborah believes, rightly so, that Angie was unfairly judged as a party girl from the beginning. And because of that, Perry County just straight up ignored her missing status. Deborah also overheard the deputy say, "Well, if it had been my daughters, I would have known where they were." Okay. She also suspects that there was some racism at play, because she thinks that the officers knew that Angie had been involved with a black man, and maybe that played into it. We see where this is going.
Nothing to see here.
In the days following Angie's disappearance, no physical search was completed by the investigators in Perry County. They didn't bring out any dogs, they didn't drag the river. Nada. Deborah, in her frustration, contacted a reporter named Diane Cobb. Deborah told Diane that she couldn't get anybody to look for her teenage daughter. She was 17 years old, and they were losing precious time. Forest County Search and Rescue called the Perry County Sheriff's Department on Friday and offered their assistance, but they were initially refused. But after Crime Stoppers ran the story, suddenly, the search was on. So canines were brought to the area, search doggos. And these dogs are trained to alert only on human DNA, blood, body parts. The dogs also found both of Angie's shoes. One had been tossed in the woods, and one was on the edge of the driveway near the bridge. But nothing else. They tracked her scent into the woods, and then it was just gone. On Wednesday, September 15th, the Petal Police Department finally decided to process the car, which had been released to the family. And the police, shocker, found nothing of evidentiary value. I mean, is this not the most egregiously inept investigation ever? Or were these people just deciding that this party girl who liked to date black men was just not worth looking for? Well, according to locals, there is a common saying in the area that if you want to do something and get away with it, you do it in Perry County. Perry County is smaller population-wise. In 1993, it was less than a quarter of the size of Forest County, although it is geographically a larger area. Perhaps these small town connections within law enforcement and other, decision makers, people in power, influence them to just not do anything. The point is, the case went ice cold. Angela Lee Freeman vanished from the face of the earth in September of 1993. She's never been found, and nobody has been charged in connection with her disappearance. As for suspects, let's talk about the connections, shall we? So, Ruby Boucher Kelly. Angela was maybe pregnant by her then husband. They got married, by the way. They actually got married the day after Angie disappeared, which is curious. And Larry Posey would definitely have motive to make her disappear, financially and responsibility. And, it's dangerous for pregnant women out there, especially if they're pregnant by somebody who doesn't want to be a father. But both Larry and Ruby had rock solid alibis, as they were geographically too far away to have been involved. The boyfriend, Stephen Lindsay, who was also maybe the father, and also from a family who didn't like Angie. It seems like he might be the favorite suspect of the police, although it didn't go anywhere. So that Friday morning, the 10th, he had been witnessed to be awake in the wee hours of the morning closing that Pizza Hut. But then he did something really odd. So Vicki Bryant, a longtime employee of the Crossroad Grocery in Sunrise, Mississippi, on the southeast side of Petal, said that she saw Stephen that morning at like 6:30. He had come in while she was serving breakfast, and he sat down where she was cleaning a table, and they just chatted about normal everyday things, but he didn't order or eat anything. The part that was odd is that she knew that he had just closed the Pizza Hut just a few hours earlier, so why was he up so early the next day, or why was he still awake? And she only ever thought about it a few days later when the Petal Police Department called to verify that he was there. Apparently, when they questioned Stephen about his whereabouts, he said, "Just ask Vicki." Had he come into the grocery just to create an alibi? The only other suspects are ones that the press have sort of linked, but it doesn't seem like Forest County or Perry County PD took the connection seriously at all. Almost 2 years after Angie's car was found at the Montted Bridge, a brutal attack and murder occurred in the same location. And without getting into the terrible details, some speculate that Angie may have been their first victim, like a practice victim. But no solid evidence has connected these cases. In 2000, a judge declared Angela Freeman to be officially deceased, and her family had believed it long before then and even held a memorial for her in 2002. Over the years, the case has been reviewed many times, and the official statement from the relevant investigation stakeholders about the case as of today is, quote, "We continue to work on the case, and we hope in the near future to have enough information to submit a case to the district attorney's office. This case is an active case, and I believe it's a very solvable case." So what do you guys think happened to Angela Freeman? Do you think this case will ever be solved? Let me know in the comments below. And that is the story of Angela Lee Freeman. If you have a Crue Trime story that you would like to recommend, look down in the description box for a link to the Google Doc where you can fill in all the dirty details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! He's just so happy to be helping me. My God, I cannot stop sneezing. I'm allergic to everything. Is that a Deborah? The leaf ridger. And decided to take a shortcut. Oh my God. My God, I'm covered in lint. Sometimes you gotta lint roll your face. You know what I'm saying? What happened? Oh my God. This is a disaster. What am I doing? Ugh.